Matt has just dropped it on me that I've got to talk for X amount of minutes while he faffs around telling people he's supposed to be faffing around and looking gormless.
I'm sharing what's going on. The live feed. Usually you get other people to do this for you, but it being the one-man band it is, usually I do this when people are describing stuff and I try and be as covert as possible. But obviously there's no chance.
I hope you're sharing, because I don't want to be speaking for 1 hour. That would be really boring.
No, you won't be speaking. I'm going through it now and sharing to the different forums that we broadcast to. So we're already broadcasting in Encouragable Rogue and on YouTube, but I'm just sharing the different platforms there.
Okay, I've got to do my bit. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Whining On with me, Melvyn, and used to be ML Flop. And the whole thing's not about me, so don't worry. No panic. It's all going to be about Mat Boden, amazing street performer who's worked lots of different places. I don't know where he's... I'm going to find out tonight where he's worked. Keep going. I'll keep going. That's fine. Because I did just a little memory of mine. I was walking in, what was it? Camden Town. And I ran into Matt. And it was the most awful place to perform. There was quite a lot of people walking past, but it really wasn't a spot where you could attempt to stop people. And those of you who are street performers, you'll know what I'm talking about. Just was a really poor place to perform. And he was amazing. He just kept going, stubborn, and just kept going and talking and talking and talking. And after, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes, he actually started to get a show, and then he got a big show. And it was pretty impressive, because most people would have walked off.
I do quite good at working shit pitches.
So that was, yes, very impressive, because I've seen people at Covent Garden go on and after 5 minutes go, oh, no, don't feel like it today. I've had enough. Next.
This is the thing, I think a lot of people in Covent are used to working in good places. And if you go off on the side streets and you work places where people don't recognise you as a performer, there's a lot of convincing you have to do and a lot of fishing. You're constantly putting your lure out, waiting for a bite, waiting for people who are interested. And then once you get your 5 or 10 people, that communicates to everyone else that there's something worth stopping for. They're a bit too cynical otherwise. They don't want to engage with you. They want to give you their focus.
So are you ready to begin?
I'm ready. All shared. We're broadcasting.
We've done all the sharing.
Everybody.
And I can shut my mouth. Okay, yeah. Good. So, Matt, since this is about you, let's begin from the beginning. How did you get into, where did it all start? What got you into street performing, one, and what led you into becoming the crazy politico that you can become as well? Okay, so there's very much haze, Susie. There's very much two stories going on, but both of them have the same real base. I was born in 16th December 1984, so it is my birthday now. I'm 36. Happy birthday for me, yay. And when I was born, I was adopted. I was adopted at a very young age. One sec. Sorry to disturb you. What year did you say?
1984.
You're joking. 1984.
I'm literally on the cusp of being a millennial. I'm kind of Gen X millennial boundary.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I was adopted at a very young age, adopted to a mining family who I got the sense from growing up with them, my mum and my dad, that they felt like when I was born, they were on the up. They were making good with themselves. And when I was 7 years old, my father left the final colliery that he worked in, and I got a feeling that it broke them a little bit. And so I grew up in what I would describe as a broken community, a community that had lost its identity. They'd lost their sense of what they were. And that did inform me. And I'm not going to talk too much about it now. I'll talk more about it later. But the double whammy for them was that they adopted a child which was hyperactive and a crazy kid, and I was all over the shop all the time, disrupting every lesson I was in. I was told off every day. There was other things that went on. You know, there was some bad lessons that I was taught by my family in some way, some bigoted feelings that they had, which then later isolated me from a lot of friends. So I didn't have many friends as a young kid. And then when I went to high school, once that thing's set in motion, you tend to sustain that. You tend to always be socially dysfunctional. So I didn't have an incredibly happy upbringing. I think I kind of ruined my mother to a certain extent. So she developed quite a bit of resentment towards me, I think. And so she'd tell me I was a bad kid quite a lot. So I left home at 16. I left home at the first chance I could. I didn't want to stay. I wanted to go and do what young people do, redefine myself, find out who I was. And so I left and went and lived in Birmingham, in a squatted old abandoned house. And we were the worst people in the world. We were partying every single day. You'd have 100 people in the house. People were burning plastic in the fires. It was an old house. It still had fireplaces. Lots and lots of things that young people partying do, but I'm not going to talk about too much here. And I was a nihilist at that point. I was a real nihilist. I believed that there was nothing really worth putting into the world. The world had nothing positive to really offer. Everything was a pantomime. Everything was a sad facade behind the brutality and the horror and the blood and the guts. And so I could be incredibly reckless, and I was incredibly reckless. The thing I used to say was, get as high as you can until you die, and the sooner the better. So I was left in this really peculiar place as a young person where I had nothing. I had no drives, and I was living a life where I didn't work. I didn't have a job. I was doing illicit trades. I was never a thief, but I always had grifts, ways to make money, ways to trade things perhaps I shouldn't have been. And it got to a point where I realized I could do this forever. And it was slowly and gradually changing who I was as a person. It was changing me into a much harder, meaner person that I wanted to be. And so I had to think, what the hell am I going to do? Crunch point. Do I continue doing this, or do I try and do something else? And I'd had an acumen for quite a lot of stuff. I was a very good athlete. I trained and was one of the best people in the country at doing hurdles in my age group. I was seen as being a gifted young scientist. I had all these things going, but through the years of getting high, these have become distant things. The only thing I could really hold on to was I was also a capable painter. I was a reasonably good drawer, artist. I'd sculpted lifelike hands out of logs that had fell down from lightning strikes in my field, because I lived in a kind of rural working class town, place called Armitage. If anyone sees an A on your toilet, that's Armitage. That's where I come from, Armitage Shanks. It's a village built around a toilet factory, and there was 2 jobs in that town. You worked in the toilet factory, or you worked in the Rugeley colliery, in the mine. So I decided I'd do an art course. I'd do a BTEC kind of foundation course, which would get me to uni, and that would get me out of the situation I was in. It would give me sort of a restart, kind of. And so I went back to my parents. I said, look, can you please put me up? And they very kindly did, because God knows, I have issues with the way that I grew up and the way I was treated, but I'm sure they had issues with the way I behaved. I wasn't an easy person to be around. I'm quite well aware of that. I'm still not an easy person to be around sometimes. And so they very kindly said yes. I did 6 months there. I did an art course there. I was quite successful in that art course, and I managed to get an interview in Goldsmiths, and I managed to get an interview at the Hornsey School of Arts. And the silly person I am, my girlfriend at the time encouraged me to take a lot of horse tranquilizer before I went for my Goldsmiths interview, to which I failed quite horribly because I couldn't communicate properly during the interview. The biggest art university in the country. And I got this sense that they really liked my work. I was doing these digital collages that used different images to try and tell a story. And so you'd have a monkey that was fusing into a baby that was snorting cocaine, and there'd be a needle there, and it was just really thematically strong stuff with really heavy imagery. But I couldn't communicate that then. I couldn't communicate anything. I just sweated and looked nervous and stuttered my words and basically didn't say anything for an interview. So I got into the Hornsey School of Arts, and the Hornsey School of Arts was essentially, it's the reject school for people doing fine arts when you don't get into Goldsmiths. And so I went there and started studying. Moved to London, moved into student accommodation to begin with, eventually into a flat in Wood Green. And the thing that struck me quite early on in the degree was that I'd seen these and read these stories of Gauguin and these, these artists that had led these amazing lives. And it really seemed like they discovered things about the world, that their art was a journey of discovery rather than just product making. And it turned out to be quite quickly that even though there was a lot of lofty conversation around the work, they were helping you to make products. And that didn't excite me. That's not something I really was moved by. And the stuff I looked at during that course that I enjoyed, like the guerrilla performances from Greenpeace and the 80s mural movement, and a lot of works that were, in fact, affecting their communities quite strikingly, that wasn't stuff that was really garnered and appreciated and pushed through there. I actually went and remember talking to my head lecturer, and I said, can I create some kind of event, and could I use that as a piece of my work? And she just scoffed and went, no. And so I decided quite early on, about a year and a half into the course, I was going to quit. And so I walked out the course. And during all this time, when I was in Birmingham, I'd got into techno music. And so I became a DJ and a producer. And so I thought, okay, right, well, this is what I'll do. I'm kind of in the chaos, trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to do with my time on this earth. I'll be a DJ. It's fun. It's around. I've got knowledge of it. I can produce. I'll do that. And so the way I decided to do that was I'd sit and be around DJs in this fashion clothing shop, this electronic dance fashion clothing shop called Cyberdog. And if you ever walk in there, it's like Disneyland for people who take ecstasy. You walk in there and everything's silver and it's all kind of futuristic, if your idea of futuristic was what people in the 1970s thought the future would look like. And there's all these people with pink ultraviolet hair, piercings through every part of the body modifications, all wearing ultraviolet stuff, really quite striking people. And I thought, okay, if I can work there, DJs go there and promoters go there to put their flyers and their CDs there, and I can get a gig. I can get a residency potentially, which I did in the end. I actually got 2 residencies, which was quite impressive considering I was completely shit.
Do you think that was the beginning of you wanting to perform?
Well, I didn't say this. I sort of skipped over it, but there's only one experience I had of performance in school that I enjoyed. And that was with me, and I'll never forget it, another lad called Andrew Finnemore. And we were asked to create a comedy sketch, and we created this news broadcast, which everybody laughed about, and it was really quite tight and it was quite funny. I don't specifically remember what we said, but we gave it gusto and we had a lot of pleasure doing it. I remember thinking how incredibly comfortable I was there, because when I was in high school, my first day of high school, my mother brought me up to the gate and turned around to me and said, right, Matt, this is your chance to have friends. Don't fuck it up. And so I didn't engage in normal social interactions with people. I was gaming, trying to have friends. I betrayed every nice person that was kind to me, and I loved everyone who was horrible to me, because I had this weird idea in my head that this is a mission to do rather than just something naturally that happens. And so I didn't have a very happy school life. And to be in front of all those people there and have them laugh was incredibly pleasurable. It brought a lot of joy and comfort to me that time. And it's only after where I realized that was something I should have really been more observant of at the time. Should have lent into more then. But there was, once again, with DJing, there was an element of joy of being in front of people and performing. I guess gaming social relationships when I was young, it teaches you to kind of perform in some way, because you have to. You're trying to make effects with people, And so when I'm working in this place, I get these residencies. These residencies aren't really ever going to go anywhere. I'm not that good. I'm playing 11 o'clock in the evening, which is the beginning slot. And I'm playing music which is so hard and aggressive and industrial that it's even a bit too much for the 5 o'clock in the morning slot, where you get somebody who want to be the hardest person there. There's no route for me to really get up there, and I'm clinging on to a sinking ship. Techno's dying. There's less and less people every year going to watch it, going to listen to it, enjoy it. So I knew it wasn't really sustainable. But, that realization came slightly after I left Cyberdog. So I'm working in this place, and the reason I started juggling, the reason that I went into performance at all, really, in the end, is Cyberdog pressuring me turned around to me and they said,
Didn't hear you. I have lost you. You have gone. You are no more. Come back.
I'm making.
Hang on. I lost you. I don't know whether the audience could hear you.
Okay, where did you
I
lose me?
couldn't. When you were at Cyberdog and you why you started juggling.
Okay, so they asked me to look more different. They wanted me to, funny thing to say, look different just like everybody else, you know. And I'd had something previously in me which had inclined me not to do that. When I was a kid, I was kind of a metal kid. I'd got into this kind of rock subculture, and as someone that didn't have a lot of mates, it was quite an attractive thing. And so I kind of adorned myself in the garbs of that tribe. And so I'd have all ripped clothes. I had big eyeliner, thick eyeliner on. I had nail varnish, spiked hair, like bangles all the way down your arms. And I was walking around in a working class post-mining town. So I got a lot of shit for this. And so when people gave me shit, I'd go, look, it's fine to be different. It doesn't matter what you look like. And within a few years of doing it, I thought, hang on a minute, it doesn't matter what you look like. Well, why am I making such an effort to look specifically this way? I'm saying it doesn't matter how you appear, but yet I'm making every conscious effort I have to appear in a certain way. So in fact, to me, it meant what I looked like meant more to me than the people who I was telling it didn't matter what you look like. And so that was a striking realization for me. I never really delved into a subculture in the same way again. I never put tribal garbs on because I kind of feel like, at least to myself, I peered through the void on that one and I saw it. It's a nonsense. It's a failed endeavor. Just what does it, if you believe it doesn't matter what you look like, you should not care too much what you look like. It shouldn't be that important to you, you know? And so when they're telling me we want you to look weird in Cyberdog, I have a natural aversion to that. I don't want to do that. I went through this thing before and I don't want to sign myself into another tribe. I don't want to take the garbs of another subculture. I just thought, no, being kind of vanilla-esque is more fitting for who I am. But I wanted to keep doing the job because I wanted these DJ positions. So I thought, how the hell do I look weird? How do I fulfill their desire while at the same time not betraying this feeling I've got? And so I went to Oddballs. Hey, Susie. I went to Oddballs and there was a contact ball there. And I'd seen David Bowie do it in the Labyrinth. You know, hello, Sarah, that kind of thing. And I thought, okay, well, I'll try that. That'll be a bit of fun. And I can do this during work and it'll make me look weird enough that they'll find me acceptable. Because the whole idea of the staff looking weird is that when the tourists go there, they go there to look at the weird looking people. It's meant to feel like this strange, you know, kind of distant subculture these people could never imagine, and they're piercing through into a world that they would never be part of otherwise. And so I can just about fit in that doing that. And so I bought a DVD called In Isolation. And I bought a contact ball. I bought an 85mm contact ball, which is about that big. And a contact ball, in case anyone doesn't know, is, everyone says they're glass balls, but they're acrylic spheres, polished acrylic spheres. And so I'm enamored with this thing. The first day I get it, I'm playing with it all the way home. I'm trying to do this movement, a butterfly movement, where you move the ball from the palm of your hand here, and it moves over and across to here. And as I'm doing it, because I'm only beginning, I've just started this, the ball rolls off my hand, rolls into the road, rolls underneath a moving car tire. And then a brief second, nothing happens. And I think, oh, it's just going to come out the other end. And then the next second, it's like a cannonball. This thing flies out from underneath the car, past my face like this, into a gridded iron fence. And it bends the iron fence, the square, rigid post, and splits the ball perfectly in half. I kept the two halves for a long time because it's quite a unique thing to have. It doesn't happen every day. So I went back the next day. I bought a new ball because by this time now I was hooked. I loved doing it. And I just played with it constantly. And I think I've inferred enough to say it. Taking a lot of drugs as a young man and having this upbringing, which wasn't particularly socially healthy, had left me internally a very anxious person. And I was having a lot of difficult internal thoughts to deal with. And so contact juggling allowed me in a group of people to be both present, but also not present. So I could sit and play with this ball, and I'm an element of the group and I'm having some input. But at the same time as that, I can focus if I feel anxious on the ball, and it kept me calm, like your Chinese stress balls, And I watch this in isolation DVD, and I practice every single move I see in there, every single move until I can do all of them, every single move in it. Really, really working hard. I'm at Cyberdog all day long. I'm working there. I'm practicing. I come home. I socialize. I'm practicing. I go clubbing. On the weekend, I've got the ball on the dance floor. I'm practicing. I'm doing literally probably 6 hours a day, every single day, this thing. And then one day in Cyberdog, one of my friends, a chap called Tim, lovely guy, he'd booked his morning off. He'd had a morning off from work to go and do a job interview. And they'd agreed, they wrote in this bloody thing, so they were going to give him a reference. So he went and did this job interview. He calls, and Vivian, bless her, I'm sure she's a lovely human being. I'm sure you're really nice now. But at the time, she had the external perception of a lady who would eat a baby with a knife and fork. She had a bit of cruelty to her. And so he calls up halfway through the day and he says, can you cover the shift? They've asked me to stay for the second half of the job interview. I didn't know this was going to happen. Really sorry. To which Vivian says, okay, I'll cover your shift. No problem. Now, managers being what managers are many times, she can't work the shop floor. She doesn't understand it properly. And so she gets about £500-600 worth of equipment stolen. All these big high-end watches, all sorts of different stuff. Through her own incompetence. And so Tim comes back in the evening and she wants revenge. So she fires him. Okay, fair enough, fire him. But she also then retracts and denies to give him reference, which meant that he lost the job interview he went to, which he got. He got the job. But he couldn't then do the job without a reference. So he lost the job he had and he lost the job he was going for. And I just thought this is really cruel. It was an unjust way to treat another human being. And I wouldn't work for them. I thought you deserve to be punished. And the only way I can punish you from where I stand for what you've done is by denying you my labour. And so I walked out there and then. I refused to work and said, I will not work for you. I left. Felt really good about myself. All the way home, I was feeling like, yes, I did the right thing. And then as I got home and I talked to my partner at the time and we were renting at that time, she quite quickly explained to me, well, what the fuck are you going to do for money? And then it kind of, the horror sets in of what you're going to do. How are you going to live, And so I thought, okay, I've seen people perform down in the South Bank. I remember Dimitri. Hey, Dimitri, if you watch this. I remember Dimitri when I was a young kid and being taken by my parents through the South Bank on a visit to London, seeing him dressed as a wizard, moving these contact balls around. And so I thought, okay, I can go and try it there. And so I go out and I go and work at the South Bank. I set up originally because I didn't want to set up with everyone else. I thought, no, I'm going to get steamrolled. I'll go find a little quiet spot on my own and I'll practice and I'll develop it and I'll understand what this is before I go and have to compete. And so I do about 2 days there. And I'm crap. I mean, I'm still learning by this point. I can do some of the moves, but nothing's comfortable. Nothing's locked in. I can barely look at people while I'm doing it. There's no sense of a show. There's no understanding. It's just a guy there doing something slightly out of the ordinary in a half-assed way with a hat out. And I earned about £1 an hour. And I'll tell you what, Melvyn, I did not deserve that £1 an hour. I didn't. But I thought,
you got
okay.
it. You got your £1 an hour.
Yes. And I thought, well, this is okay. I'm not earning as much as in Cyberdog, but damn it, I'm enjoying this more and I'm getting better at this. So I'm going to keep doing this. And by day 2, security come and they turn around and they say, oh, you can't work here. And I'm a greenhorn. I didn't have the political convictions I have now. They say, you've got to go and perform with all the other performers up on the South Bank at the 100-metre stretch, just down from the London Eye. So you have the London Eye. And then for 100 metres after that, there was at least then this kind of amnesty area where performers could work and the security wouldn't hassle them. So I went up there and immediately, as I look around, I realise I have to improve a lot more. I do a day and I think I still earn about £1-2 an hour, which I'm okay with. I remember walking back on my first day being there and seeing a reggae musician called Derek. And he's there, he's got his mic stand in front of him, he's playing a tune, he stops the tune, he goes, "Oh, come on, South Bank, don't give up on me, man." And you can hear the tired, distraught tones coming out of him. And I just thought, oh, Christ, is that my future? Went home, you know. And at this point, around this time, my relationship breaks up with the lady I'm living with, sharing a room with. She decided to become partners with one of our housemates. So that meant that
she couldn't live on £1 an hour.
No, yeah. Well, I think she was the daughter of an ambassador, and she had ideas of, she had pretensions. Not necessarily a wrong thing to have, but street performer as your partner, that doesn't fit into that, And plus, as well, as I said, I'm not the best human being all the time. I have my moments being a dickhead. We've all had those moments. So we break up and I have to leave. There's no way I can stay in a house where my ex-girlfriend is now knobbing my housemate. So I talk to a few friends and we find this empty house in Wood Green. And this house had been abandoned for about 10 years. Completely normal house apart from a board in the window, but it's obviously not been lived in for a very, very, very long time. And so we jump over a back garden, me and my friend. And as we're jumping over these gardens, it's the middle of summer, so we're trying to be bloody quiet so no one hears us, get round to the back of this place. And lucky enough, we open the window, the bloody window's open. So we walk in there, we secure the place, and we lived in there for about 2 years.
Yeah, but how about getting back to the performing side?
So this is the reason I mention it, okay? And from doing these interviews, this has only made me believe this more than ever, is that squatting, rent relief, as we could call it, is a kind of artistic substance.
Losing you, help.
For me to go on the South Bank every day and earn £1 an hour and not be worried about that and get better. Did you hear all that?
I heard the end of it. Okay,
so yeah, I believe that squatting and the opportunities they give to that are a kind of subsidy. It's rent relief, and it enabled me to go down there. And despite the fact I'm earning £1 an hour, which changed over time, but at that time earning £1 an hour, it didn't matter. If I could get enough food to eat, if I could get enough food to buy equipment if I needed it, and to get the buses if I wanted to take them, I could continue developing. I wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise.
Yeah,
and I didn't have...
this you're talking about here. What about here? How were you feeling? How were you feeling about sitting there with the contact ball and people not taking a lot of notice? Were you thinking about trying to learn something else, or what was going on?
Well, that wasn't a problem at that time. When I began, I just loved contact juggling so much that it didn't matter to me. I was doing it on the bus on the way in to do shows, and I just loved the fact that people would watch you on the bus and you could make people's journeys a bit nicer. I didn't ask for any money. I just did it. When I went out and did it all day, I was just focusing on getting better. I wasn't doing a show at this point. What's interesting is as I developed, the bitterness starts working in after. That comes in after you develop a show and you feel like you've got a product. At that point, I was just loving juggling. I was loving contact juggling. I was just trying to perfect everything, trying to think of new ways to move, watching people who were watching the watchers, so to speak, and seeing what they liked, seeing what impressed them, seeing what caught their attention more than anything else. It was a time of exploration and an expanding of understanding. And I got better. I think at the end of the year, I was coming up for being one of the better contact jugglers in the country. Top 30, maybe, top 20. And the UK has the best contact jugglers at that time in the world. This In Isolation DVD was all more or less UK contact jugglers that I'd been learning from. And so it was then that I started understanding a bit more about doing a show, how a show worked. I'd been watching other people around, and the circle shows were kind of somewhat distant. I never really, because it seemed unattainable. It seemed these people were incredible, powerful, mythic creatures that I wasn't. I was just a guy juggling on the side street. But what I did see was the other half circle performers, people who performed 10-minute shows. They'd queue up with me. I'd always be happy to share with people. I liked seeing stuff, you know. And I saw the way they did their shows and the way they structured them. So they'd have music on all the way through. They'd use the props at the beginning to elicit something that's happening, place the props out, make sure they gathered a little crowd, and then they'll do a 10-minute routine. And so that's what I did. I slowly developed this 10-minute routine, which went from isolating things, you know, doing this fixed point movements, to then going on and doing some kind of break dancery, kind of liquid movement kind of stuff. And then I would go into body rolling, where I'd roll the ball around my body and I'd do full arm rolls. And I think towards the end, I was doing 2-ball body rolling. So I'd have 2 balls and I could roll them around my body at the same time in different directions, in different motions, which is actually very difficult to do. This is where the bitterness comes in. So when I get this 10-minute show, I start getting the concept that this is a product and that I deserve to be paid. And so when I start feeling that, what's interesting is that I stop juggling around my friends. I stopped juggling on the bus. All the stuff I did just for the sheer joy, I'm no longer doing now. I'm going to work.
You're taking the fun out of it and you're making it a job.
Exactly that. It became a job. It became important what I earned, and I was disappointed when I didn't earn what I thought I deserved. And
which is
what happened with that as well is
hang on, which is what we both talked about is that happens quite a bit in terms of some people perform for the love of it, and some people get caught up in it's a job, and it's like they're clocking in to do their work.
Yes. And it's something that later on I think I've managed to actually get away from by getting in contact with my fine artist side. And I think that's what pulled me out of that a little bit. But at this point, I'm very much in that mode. And so what made me really unhappy was people would film and they'd walk away. They'd take pictures and leave, and they didn't treat you like a person. They treated you like an object. And it really started to make me hate doing it. And I started to not want to do it. And I was actively, you know, finding excuses if I could not to. But I was still, you know, this was the only thing I had going in my life. So I was going to keep doing it. I had no idea what else to do.
Well, by this point, were you earning enough money to live?
Very much so. I could earn, you know, 3 figures in a day. By this point, I was good. You know, I was a very competent contact juggler, and I'd understood how, I'm going to take this very hot, I'm going to take this woolen waistcoat off. I understood how to work a show, how to get paid from, you know, at least 30-40% of my crowd. And instead of doing one big show like I would nowadays, I'd get there at 7 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning on the South Bank, secure my pitch, and then I'd work from 10 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, more or less consistently. You know, 3, 4, 5, you know, maybe 4 shows in an hour, all the way through the day, 10-minute shows. So you're not making a huge amount, but you're doing so many shows that it adds up. At this point, I got offered by a chap to go to Edinburgh. And I was like, all right, I'll go to Edinburgh. Why not? You know, see what it's like. This chap turned out to be actually quite a rock. Are you still there, buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah, cool. So I went to Edinburgh for the first time. I got the megabus up with this chap called Steve. He was a silver homeless guy. He was a silver statue. And he said, I'll take you up. Don't worry. I'll show you places to stay. You'll be fine. You'll be fine with me, mate. It's going to be brilliant. And so I got there.
Was that Graham?
No, it's not. It was a chap called Steve. He actually, in the end, he was actually quite a nasty bloke. Yeah, when I get to the end of this little bit, you'll hear about how you got to be careful with some people sometimes. And so I got there during Jazz Week. This is the week before the Fringe begins. And I do my little bit on the Royal Mile. And I realised very, very quickly that my little bit that I'm doing, it don't mean nothing compared to all the other shows that are around. I'm getting steamrolled by everybody, by every single person. I'm not talking, I'm not engaging, and it's not locking in. So I go to this chap, Steve, at the end of the day, and I say, Steve, look, I've had a horrible day. I thought it'd be so much better than this, you know? And he turns around and punches me in the face. He says, how dare you? I bring you up here, all you do is fucking complain. I'm like, oh, fucking hell, wow, you know? So I go and sleep in a doorway that night, and I'm sitting there contact juggling and mucking about just to keep myself busy in my mind. And then a couple of young kids come by and say hello and chat with me. In the end, they let me stay on their floor in their flat. So I go and stay on the floor of their flat, and then I leave the next day and go back to London. But by this time now, I've already realised that you talk in shows. That's how shows work. If you want to do these bigger, more powerful shows, I've actually moved away from the idea of seeing people as these mystic gods, and I've seen it as being more attainable now. I've reached the cap of what I was doing in that way, and this is how I develop more. So I go back to the South Bank, and I start trying to talk in shows. And as I'm talking these shows, all I'm doing is I'm saying, if you want to see another trick, say yeah, over and over and over again with there's no narrative, there's no theme, there's no character, there's nothing, literally nothing. And James, the first person I interviewed in the channel, lovely chap, check out his interview. He sets up next to me on the circle pitch, and he goes, don't watch this guy. He's just going to show you a trick and then ask you to say yeah over and over again. I've wrote a show, I tell jokes, I've got actual things to say. And it hurt me deep, you know. I looked at oh, Christ, mate.
That's nice.
But I take credit to be kind. He was right. He was correct. And through that hurt, I went and I, probably the same as he did at the beginning, I went and looked at the Gazzo DVD. I mentioned it in the interview. I pirated it. I apologized, and he luckily thanked me, accepted my apology. So I got this Gazzo DVD off the internet, and I got all these different magic books off the internet, and I got all this wealth of information. I started actively researching broader than just contacting. I started trying to understand what it was to perform. I looked at performers.net, the old website, and I started reading all the posts on performers.net about what it is to do a show, different crowd psychologies. So something I read that always sticks with me is this idea that you have three psychologies in a crowd. You have a loose assortment of strangers, loose group, and then you have a psychologically
I personally can't hear you.
Still there, buddy?
Do not know. Now I am. So the first part you went, what was it? The psychology, three aspects.
Yes. And so you've got these three different types of crowd, and primarily these types of crowd, they work off the size of crowd you have. And so if you've got 10 people, they're thinking as individuals. They're not thinking together. There's no group think in what they're doing. They are engaging in what you're doing as one brain. Then you get to your middle size.
Hang on. Susie's just written, and because it's what I didn't hear either. What were the three psychologies?
So now I'm trying to research, and so I'm looking around everywhere. I'm trying to gain all this information. And so I go to performers.net. It was a great resource back then. It really was. It helped me so much to understand before I went and queued up. And one of the things that it had described in there was there was three types of show. And in terms of like three types of crowd. And so you have the beginnings, you have a loose assortment of strangers. Then you have a sort of halfway point, you sort of half grouped up people in terms of psychology. And then you have your kind of one mind when you have a huge crowd. And so with 10 people, they think as individuals. They're not thinking together. There's no group thing. There's no intuitive group behavior happening. Then when you get 20, 30, 40, 50 people, they're starting to think together. They're starting to intuitively respond to things as one. But they're still not quite locked in. And then when you get to the point where you get 100, 200, 300 people, then you start getting this group thing. The audience starts acting as one. They laugh, they cheer, and they respond as one organism. And then it becomes far easier to work that crowd. You don't have to be as good to a bigger crowd as you do with a smaller crowd. You have to be far more competent to work a smaller crowd because they are more cynical and objective when they're watching you. Really interesting.
When I was working and I was watching, say, Cool Shades perform, who did their clapping and cheering amazingly. I couldn't believe how well they could get people to shout, cheer. It was unreal. Those two were really good at it, John and Paddy. Just by doing that, and all the people joining in to do the same thing, it made them into a group, an audience. It gave that.
Yes.
That seemed to be a psychology that.
Well, there's no doubt with
me.
So if you get people to do things together, what you're doing first of all is you're establishing that you are the person that's in control, that's competent, that's guiding what's happening. You're steering their behavior. And when people do things together as a group, then yes, it does reinforce this. But if you do that with 10 people, you will not get those people to the same psychological state as if you do it with 200 people. The aim, I would argue, Cool Shades were doing at the time is they're trying to take it from 50 people or 30 people, and they're trying to take it up to 100 people. And then when they have 100 people, the clapping and cheering will diminish because you've got that group think by that point. You've got everyone thinking together. And so they're absorbing the information in a way like you absorb a movie more. You know, there's a suspension of disbelief as they all think together that they wouldn't have as individuals. They'd be more cynical as individuals. So I learned that, and I found that really valuable. And I learned all the Gazzo lines. Every Gazzo line there was, I learned. And I knew them off by heart. All of them. And so because he's doing a cups and balls show, and I'm using a contact ball, these lines would fit in quite well. So I'd go, hold the ball, there's the gay guy, this. All these other different, you know, quite acerbic lines. And because I'm reasonably good at talking, I developed this skill early on. I don't know how and I don't know why. I've been a social retard most of my life, but I managed to do it. They worked for me, and I was getting big laughs. And I was set up next to the circle pitch, still doing 10-minute shows, but just hitting the laughter in between. And I do a show every time the circle act's finished, and I do 10 minutes in between when setting up and taking the gear off.
I have to tell you, Gazzo probably wants his commission now.
Yes, Gazzo, we'll talk about it. I think I will say this, the Gazzo Cups and Balls show, the most pervasive show in the world for street magic. The guy has shaped the world of street performance more than probably any other individual, at least alive today, no question. But I'll get on to, I think, the problematic nature of those lines. And I do think there's problematic natures. And my work later on tried to address those problematic natures. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So one day, what happens is, Evil Paul Tolhurst, which is a lovely guy. And I think it's a weird...
Evil Paul. It's really soft.
He's the loveliest... He's softly spoken. He's a lovely guy. He's really gentle. But if you ever do something that he thinks is wrong, there's a different look that goes in his eyes. He looks like he's about to go and break a 15-year-old's neck when they set up next to the pitch, you know. And so people as jokingly called him Evil Paul because he's a nice guy, but you don't want to get on the wrong side of him. And so he comes up to me one day, and he says, "Look, I think it's by time now you queue with the rest of us." Because I'm getting big shows, and they're only 10, 15 minutes long, but they're big shows, and they're starting to hamper the circle acts from beginning their shows. They're having to wait for me to finish for them to begin. And so I go, like, fair enough, okay? You know, these are people I respect now. They're not godly and unattainable like they felt before, but they're still people that I aspire to be. Doing these big, long shows. At that point, the idea of talking for 40 minutes in a show and doing a 40-minute long show seemed almost impossible to my mind. I just didn't know how the hell you do it. How can you do tricks for 40 minutes was what I was thinking. Little did I know. And so I move over to the circle pitch and I leave this half circle pitch behind. And fuck me, Melvyn, it was a shock because I'm going from doing 12, 13, 14 shows a day to doing 1 or 2 shows a day. I went from earning, you know, potentially 3-figure multiples, potentially on good days, to earning about 20, 30 pounds in the day. Whoops. Overnight. Well, not whoops, you know, it was an important part of my development. I will thank Paul for that my entire life. If he hadn't done that, I wouldn't have took that leap. And it forced me, and I saw and recognized what it was doing to me at the time. It forced me to develop my work. If I did not want to have to embrace poverty, I had to get better at what I was doing. So I did. You know, I started learning different bits and bobs. And by this time, I moved out of this house that I'd squatted in Wood Green, and I moved into a big social centre. A social centre, in case anyone doesn't know, is the name for quite a large squat. Usually they're between 10 to 20, 30 people. They can go up to, 50 people living there. And the squat isn't just somewhere where people live, but they do cafes there. They do social events there. One of the particular places I was in slightly after this, but it's one of the best examples of this, had an art studio inside it where people could go and develop work and producer who was producing albums for free for your local kids bands. We had a print studio where people were doing screen printing, and they taught people how to screen print there. 3 or 4 people now have careers in screen printing from being there. We had a theatre there, and there was a chap who lived there, and we lived in a place before called Rocket. Now I have a tattoo on my back that says Showtime in kind of dark italics. Rocket, yes, German guy. He's a huge chap. He's about 6'5", big, huge beard, got no teeth. He's got chili pepper tattoos for his sideburns. He's got a rocket tattooed on his head like this, bald. He's got a big red star across his face here, tattooed. He looks terrifying if you were so inclined to be scared of punks. But he's one of the nicest guys you've ever met. He's soft and gentle and supportive and lovely. I remember watching him in a place called the Cheese Factory. There was another social centre. At this point, there's about 4 or 5 social centres all over London. And all of these social centres would interact with each other, would go and take food to each other, would go to each other's shows and cabarets and cafes.
What year was that?
And I saw Rock. Oh, Christ. We've got to be looking at about 2008 by this point, 2009, around about there. And so when I saw Rocket perform for the first time, I knew all the lines he was doing. But his competence, his character, his physical appearance, the way all the lines and all the pieces made sense together, the way he presented it all, stunned me. It was so much more compelling and unique than anything I'd seen most of the guys do on the South Bank. Most of the stuff on the South Bank the guys were doing was great, but it kind of had a bit of a sameness to it, and there was a lack of flavor as themselves, doing the functional things to do a show. Whereas this guy, he's got no teeth. He's tattooed all over him. He's shoving spoons in his nose. He's stapling himself. He does the tennis racket routine, which a lot of people did, but the way he did it was so much funnier and interesting. Because of him as a character, because of his ability to be both, verging, anarchic, crazy, chaotic guy, but at the same time as that, be warm and cuddly and lovable, And so,
are you saying there was a difference between, say, what was going on in the South Bank with some of the shows, where they're doing it? Things are similar in each show, but then you see this other guy, and he's got a character that's really obvious and
yes,
hits you in the face as an audience.
Yes, very much so. And the character informs all the little details of things he's doing. And he could talk and do things in a way that other people could go, hello. And when he did that, it would make sense with his character. It wouldn't look like he was overacting or he's weird or he's disjunct or out of place. It all made sense. All of it. I was actually quite in awe of him at the time. And so we move into a social centre, me, him, another 10, 12 people. And we start sharing stuff. He straight away starts showing me magic tricks. He shows me the tennis racket routine. He shows me the routine that I've now done for most of my life. Thank you, Rock. He shows me loads of different things. He basically starts nurturing me and teaching me as a performer. And that's the reason why, in the end, I got him to tattoo my back and put Showtime across my shoulders in his style, because it's a memory. It's always a piece that I'll have with me, a piece of respect for him teaching me and helping me develop. And I did develop. So I started doing the tennis racket. I do the blockhead at the start of the show. I knock nails into my face. And I started talking a bit more. And I slowly, over time, developed this show. and made this show better, made it into a more powerful, competent piece of work. It had a start, a middle, and an end. And I was still the same as every other person on the South Bank doing this show, which was kind of devoid of character, using all these Gazzo lines all over the place. Any lines I could find, I would take and use. You know
what's funny? Just you mentioned the nail up the nose. Although I never saw it, Zippo, who created this massive circus, which still exists, Zippo Circus, he did some at the time. I never saw this, but he did Covent Garden, and I once asked him what he did there, and he used to do the nail up the nose.
A lot of people began doing it because it's a no-skill routine. It's actually just completely, it's like sticking your finger up your nose. You know, there's a cavity, it goes back to there, and you can insert something into it.
Not if you've got a crooked nose.
Well, yeah, if you've got a crooked nose, it might be a bit more difficult. But generally speaking, it's a no-skill routine that gets a very evocative response from people. The people, when they see it, really do shudder and creep into themselves. In the end, I actually came to the assumption that it was actually damaging the show. It was making people recoil. And when you see it in a theatre, recoiling into your seat is actually quite an interesting and pleasant experience. But when you're on the street and you make people recoil, they just keep recoiling until they're gone. You know, you lose them. You lose that connection with them, or at least I did. So that soon left the show. At this time as well, Rocket, he'd been living in New York, and he was hanging around with a group which Feeble talked about last night. He didn't mention the name, but I will. The Black Rebel Motorcycle, the Black Rebel Bicycle Club. And these guys were kind of bikers, rock kids, anarchists, who would all take to the streets on bicycles, and they'd make these things called freak bikes. And so you'd have one bike with another bicycle welded on top of it, with a chain from the top linked down to the bottom. You'd have bikes that swiveled and turned in center axis. You'd had choppers. So you see quite commonly now these chopper bicycles that can be sold. That all comes from these guys in America making these freak bikes out of old bits of broken bicycles. And because Rocket had been there, he'd learned how to make these things, and he made me a tall bike. And so I started using this tall bike and riding it to the show, used to put all my props on this tall bike. And I got a friend to build me this kind of this A-frame which plugged into it. So you've got your natural A-frame of a bike, and then you've got this plug-in A-frame here that sits across it, kind of like that. And so it's a 5.5 foot portable stage. Incredible prop, absolutely amazing prop. You can stand on top of there, no skill needed. You can see every single row of your audience. You have to put it together at the start of the show so it builds its own crowd. It's an incredible piece of prop work. And so I then start working other pitches. For some reason, I can't remember why, I decided to travel out of the South Bank and go and perform in Trafalgar Square. And by this time now, I've been squatting for about 5, maybe 6 years. So we're getting up towards 2009, maybe 2010. Been squatting for quite a long time. I'm used to now telling the police no. Because if the police come to your door and say, open the door now, and you open the door, you've lost your house. So I'm used to being adversarial with the police. It's not something that I find uncomfortable, which most people do because you never have an opportunity to do it in your life most of the time. And definitely not with legal knowledge. Whereas when I'm doing that in the squat and you talk to the police, you have to quote the legislation and the details of the law of why you won't do that. You have to be able to respond to them when they try and fool you and trick you into letting them into the house to kick you out.
Matt, do you think we can carry on with the line of how you grew as a performer?
Very much so.
Rather than go off onto.
So we won't move into that completely.
Fights.
So I go work at Trafalgar. I start performing there. The council are constantly trying to move me on, but I carry on, and I develop this big show there. And I still don't go to Covent Garden at this point because I've been told that Covent Garden is the big place. It's all where all the best performers are. I remember people on the queue in the South Bank telling me, do a few years, get your show together, then go there. Of course, now I know that they're saying that because they don't want to miss out on the draw, and they're just keeping the numbers down. But I didn't know that then. Yeah. And so one day while I'm doing a show at Trafalgar, And I've got a 40-minute show. It's a reasonably good show. I'm keeping people. They stay till the end. I get reasonably well paid for what I'm doing. A guy called Bino Sabran, comes up to me in the show. He's a beautiful clown show. I think he's living in Scotland at the moment. Very, very big in the children's entertainment circuit. And so he walks up to me and he says, look, why don't you come and work Covent Garden? I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm good enough. And he goes, no. You are easily good enough to work there. So I go there and people have already watched my shows. They vouch for me. They say, yes, he's good enough to work there. And so I begin working in Covent Garden. And people are generally quite nice. There's a bit of cynicism at the beginning. People are a little bit like checking you out, seeing if you've got anything,
What year is that?
Oh, Christ. This must be 2010. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's about 2010 by this point. I think. Not certain. It could be 2009. Might have even been 2008. My life has been a bit of a blur. There wasn't many real good timing points to judge things by. And I didn't look at what year or date it was most of the time. So I was just this crazy kid living in abandoned buildings and going on the street and earning money. Am I still with you?
It went a bit slow, but we were okay.
Hey, Mel. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I was just this crazy kid, I was living in abandoned buildings with big groups of people. We were putting on shows. We were doing that stuff there. Then I'd go on the street and I'd make me cash on the street and come back. It was just a very crazy, chaotic time, this whole period. So I had no idea what year it was or what date it was or when things happened, No bloody idea at this time.
So were you getting confident, overconfident?
I don't think I was necessarily overconfident because I always, despite my external appearance, I lack a lot of self-confidence. I'm quite down on myself, even though people will think that's complete rubbish. It's not, I do constantly grind myself into the ground. And so...
Whoops. Lost you for a minute. I have lost you, Matt. You're not here. What's going on? Can anybody else hear Matt, or is it just me? I can see the comments. So if anybody can hear Matt, can you say so? Because then I'll know everything's okay. But nobody is commenting. Maybe they can't hear me. Matt, we're at the interesting part where you're at Covent Garden. You've got a big show. So, you've gone blank now. We got to this interesting moment where you're doing a big show. We don't know what's in the big show. Yeah. Calvin. Oh, you're back. Lots of people are telling me you're gone and frozen. And,
yes, I did go. Hey, everybody, I'm back.
Gary and Mike and Susie.
Can't hear the guy with the mustache. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, guys?
Graham's being very polite with you, actually.
I know he is. He's calling me a gentleman. I'm surprised. Thank you, Graham. So I'm going to try and carry on. If you still can't hear me, just let me know, okay?
I can.
Yeah, it was a power cut, Mike.
You're at 2010.
Okay, so when I started working in
you're doing a big show at Covent Garden. And what was in the big show?
Yes, I begin working at Covent with a functional show.
And what was it?
I'm now a street performer. I've got a circle show. It's a 40-minute show. It works.
What was in the show?
What was in it? So I begin the show with contact juggling. I had this big belief. So I had this big belief that you had to start the show with skills. You start the show by showing you're good at stuff. So I contact juggle to begin with. And I always felt like it was a difficult sell, the contact juggling. You're basically, let's see if this helps the signal. You're trying to take something which is perfectly positioned to create mystery and to make people feel hypnotized. And you're trying to then take that and push it into a hype show, push it into a way of driving energy up, which it doesn't necessarily work well with. But I managed to figure out a way to do it. So I'd begin by isolating this contact ball, and then I'd do high throws and catch them on the tip of my elbows and on the elbows there, and hit my arm and catch them here with high throws and pump the crowd with that, with the contact juggling. Then I discovered quite quickly, I did a lot of martial arts when I was a very young kid. I discovered I could jump into the box splits without even warming up. I think, I was 25 maybe at this point, 26, 27, and I could still jump into the box splits easily. So then I'd do a one step, one clap routine, get everyone to clap as I stepped, and I'd jump straight into the box splits. Pick my leg up, put it around my back, pick my other leg up, put it around my back, and then stand up with my leg behind my back, one of them. And then I'd get my tennis racket and I'd go through the tennis racket. That was the show. If I had the bicycle with me, which I think I did shortly after that, I'd do the same thing, but the idea was that you go down low on the ground for the contortion and then you go back up high again, up onto this high object. So you're drawing people in by going low, and then you're going up high so everybody can see you at the end. And so I had a really interesting experience. One of the first shows I did there was a midweek day. I've built a crowd. I've got a reasonably decent crowd. And unlike some of the Covent Garden performers, I've worked lots of side pitches. So I know how to build a crowd on a slow day, like what we started the interview with. And so I've built this crowd on this quiet day. And I'm really happy because I've got to the point where this is a show that's working. I've got past the middle stage of crowds. I've gone to the later stage. There's 100 people there. They're thinking as one. They're an audience as opposed to strangers grouped together. And all of a sudden, this guy walks out on the center pitch. Huge, great fat guy. He's massive. He's got a big, huge white beard. He looks like Santa, that got kicked out by Mrs. Claus and turned to the drink. And he has a huge, big backpack on. So he walks center stage right next to me, looks at me, smiles and laughs, goes, ha, 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 ha. Drops his backpack and produces from his backpack a litre of whiskey, a litre bottle of whiskey, opens it, and then starts drinking like this. And because of the soft, gentle nature of him, because he's smiling, because he's happy, the audience instantly warm to him. And so they cheer, the balcony's cheering from, everyone's laughing about this happening. And I'm not capable to play with him because he's doing his own thing. He's not interacting with me in any way. So I ask him, oh, mate, look, this is lovely. This is really funny, but can I get you to move across to the side? And he just goes, ha! Carries on drinking his whiskey. And so I'm going behind him, expressing my discontent behind him so he can't see me, and then going in front of him and being really polite with him. And so the audience start getting into this kind of vibe of laughing at the fact that I can't deal with this obstacle. This huge obstacle has now come into the show. I can't continue, but I'm being nicely natured about it. I'm not being mean. I've not picked on him. I've not made him feel bad.
Clowning.
Yeah.
The clown has a problem and he has to try and find a solution.
Well, this was exactly it, and I think this is a thing to remember, and this is something I have sometimes in my career failed at, is that you don't ever want to turn to being vindictive or nasty or mean. You're constantly playing around the problem. You're trying to solve it. You're trying to find a solution which everybody can feel happy about. And so this goes on for about 5 minutes. He gets he gets about a quarter of the way through this bottle of whiskey, this litre. He's drank a quarter of a litre of whiskey in this time. He's knocking it back. And in the end, I figure out, okay, I can't move him. He won't move. So I turned to the crowd and said, look, if he won't move, I'll tell you what, let's all move. We'll do it. Everyone together, take one step that way. And the entire crowd shifts like this. And he's set the stage with me. And so we all shift one step at a time until we walk the crowd out of him, so to speak. And he's then on the other side. And bless him, he had a sense of fair game because as it happened, he watched it happening. And when it happened, he smiled and he laughed and he went and sat down behind the show and watched. Everybody in that show, it was one of the best shows I had there when I was learning, had this joy that this obstacle had appeared and that we'd all together, they got to experience my frustration and they got to laugh at me failing and falling, the Schreidenfreude. But then we overcame it. We all overcame it together and we all got to feel good about it at the end. No one had to feel shit, which has stuck with me for a long time. using things that happen to you, using the chaos that goes around you. Anything that happens in your show is a gift. It's a gift for you to either be able to present a part of the human condition or be able to have a game and play and move around. Everything is just a present for you to play with. So during this time, I developed what I describe as a power show. I sat there night after night watching Mark Rothman do his evening shows, all with music, loads of nice skills, really powerful, huge crowds, making incredible amounts of money. He'd go into an empty pitch and he'd have 300-400 people there by the end, all cheering and all paying for him. And I just thought, wow, this is what I want to be, you know? So I developed a show that's that. Everything's to music. I developed this kid routine at the beginning where I'd get him to stand around in different places. I'd play a few different games with him, and then I get the kid to hold the racket, all to music. Then I do the leg behind the head. Then I go up on the top of the bike and do the racket. But it's all hype. Everything was hype. The comedy basis slowly worked itself out of the show, the lines. And I did this show for maybe a couple of years, maybe a year, to the point where I got it solid. I was making top-level hats consistently. I was one of the highest hatters on all the pitches I was at with this show. Very proud of it. You know, naive in my mind, I thought this is a street performer. I've done it. And then I met a chap called Brian Reed. I think everyone here will know Brian. Brian Reed is one of the few street performers that does a show where 99% of that show is his material, that he's sat down and he's written and he developed. And so he turns around to me and goes, "You're not a fucking artist. You're a busker. What of this is yours? What's originally your show? What's it saying? Why are you doing any of this?" It hurt me deep, you know, because I saw myself as an artist. I am an artiste. You know, I'm creating joy. I didn't see myself necessarily as an entertainer. I saw myself as an artist, falsely, because there wasn't any of me in that. It was craft. It was making something that functioned for a purpose. It didn't say anything, and it didn't say anything about me. And this happened around the same time as, for some reason I can't remember, I didn't have my tall bicycle. And so at this point, I have a tall bike, and I've learned how to do a double pirouette with a chainsaw. First person in the world, as far as I'm aware, to do a double pirouette with a chainsaw. I know that Shane Guthrie, the Space Cowboy, now has done it because he's a greedy bastard and he has to have every single record. But I was the first person to do it, as far as I'm aware. It took me 3 years to do in my off time, training to do this bloody throw. And one day I'm out with just a tennis racket and a speaker, and I don't have all these big props. And I try and build a crowd. And Melvyn, I can't fucking do it. I can't build a crowd. And it's a busy day. It's not that there isn't people there, but all the skills that I developed when I started learning, the conversation, the gentle playing, talking to people one by one, all of it had shriveled up and diminished by me making this power show that's all set to music and all with big props, with limos, large impressive metal objects. I didn't have any of it. And this is at the same time as I'm basically being called a hack by Brian. And so I just thought, well, fuck me, this can't stand. I can't allow myself to not be able to do this. I can't rely on props. I have to rely on me. I have to be capable to do this.
I want to ask you something now.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you're basically taking your personality out of the show, those things that make you who you are, to do the power show.
No, it's not that I take them out. They're not taken out. It's just that there's less room for them to be expressed, because everything is on a note. It's the same every time, and I'm not writing it to express one of my feelings or to express my personality that time. I'm writing it to do a specific task. I need people to cheer here to keep engagement. I need people to cheer at the beginning because I want to gather more people. I need people to laugh shortly here because I want to soften their feelings when I go to the kid bit. I want this kid bit to do this. So it's all very tactical. It's all designed to do a purpose that is specific. You're not in the moment. Say that again.
Then you're not in the moment with the audience. You're actually
not at all.
That's what I wanted to get at. And so
I'm not in the moment. There was no thought. Any time that the show went off script, I would desperately grab and pull the show as hard as I could back onto script, because I knew that everything had to be done at time and had to be done, you know, in sequence. And if I dropped a beat, the energy would lull, and I couldn't do that for that show to work. And there was no real way I could do what I thought was art in that show, and there wasn't space for myself in that show. There wasn't much space for myself.
What do you mean by art?
Well, I'd say that art has subtext and metaphor. You know, if someone does a piece of artwork, it conveys something. It has something behind it. You know, that's how I think about it, at least. So I would say comedians are artists, and the part of the comedy that's an art is the messages that are put behind there, the communication, the complexity of communication. That's how I would diagnose it as being art or not art. Between art and craft. You know,
that seems a bit airy-fairy to me, and very intellectual, and I don't make an awful lot of sense of it.
Well, all I'm saying with this is, and I said in the description, I am quietly quite pretentious, and I am. There's no doubt. So when you say artistic and airy-fairy, there's an idea that's been carried over from doing fine art that I realise now, and I didn't realise then, about what I believe is art and what I believe art can do. I think art communicates things, has an ability to test people's views and inform people's views. Brian Reed says, "Tell him I wasn't a cunt." Brian, you weren't a cunt. You were lovely, and you were and are integral to my development as a human being, and I thank you for it. All right.
Can I just add something in? Over many years, I always had a secret joke for myself, which was a homage to Brian in loads and loads of shows. I had my own secret joke, which was not funny to anyone else, but was to me, and it was a homage to Brian.
What was it? Are you going to tell us what the joke was?
No, it was really not. It was only funny for me. So to say what it was, it's boring.
All right, fair. Well,
I did have a homage to Brian for many years, in lots of things I did.
There you go, mate. So I'd taken all of this, and you know, we can talk about the art stuff. It'll become a bit clearer later on when I actually start writing stuff, what I mean by it. I took all the big props. I took the chainsaw, the big bicycle, even playing loud music at the beginning of a show. I took all of it out. Every single bit of it I removed from the show. And I went out with a backpack, with a tennis racket, a speaker and a mic, and nothing else. And I told myself, you build a crowd using your personality. It will force you to write material. It will force you to develop stuff. Not necessarily striving to be an artist at that point. I hadn't quite realised my views on it at that point. But it would force me to be a better entertainer, essentially. And so I went out there and, you know, I sucked hard for a while. But I started using all the Gazzo lines. All these old lines that I'd learned before came back to me. And all the old stock lines came back to me. But I'd been talking to Brian. And Brian had told me, you know, that people write stuff. He said, these lines don't come from nowhere. People have written these lines. They've only become stock because someone nicked them. And someone else nicked them from him. And then nicked them from him. And they got so diffused that suddenly the ownership was almost lost in this huge sea of theft. And so I thought, well, I want to put myself in this. I want to be an artist. I want to have my personal views embedded within the work. And so one of the first things I did was I looked at the old Gazzo lines and I saw them as incredibly problematic. They are, because Gazzo plays your nasty uncle, it's kind of, it makes sense that he's a bit homophobic and a bit backwards in his views. I'm not that person. And I wasn't that character. So I wanted to take these lines and I wanted to be able to get the marionette strings of laughter still going with the way the jokes worked, but make the jokes actually be positive, reframe them. So instead of saying, here's the gay guy, I'd go, oh my God, it's my ex-boyfriend, Peter. Peter, why are you coming here? I miss you. Why are you playing with my heart? You know, so what you do then is you take the emphasis of the joke. You take the joke being about this guy and you move the power relationship. The power relationship changes. So instead of everyone laughing at that guy and you embarrassing that guy, what happens is that guy becomes an element of a story in which you lose, in which you're the fall guy, in which the laughter sits upon you. And so I took all these old lines that were kind of sexist or homophobic or racist, and I started trying to rework those lines, retool them, so they actually did the opposite. They became positive.
Yeah, put it in context. Some of those lines and the negative connotations you give them, when the people were doing those lines, because of their character, they didn't necessarily have that connotation because their character undercut what they were saying.
And it was a different time as well. So if you look at these lines being done in the early 80s, this was a time where potentially there was a lot more bigotry and hatred around. So even talking about this subject matter was in some way liberating and in some way positive. To have it as a context, I had to say, oh, there's the gay guy, and everyone laughs about it. But even just mentioning it might have been something progressive in that time. I don't know. I was not around or very, very young when that happened, but I imagine so.
No, I just wanted to mention that.
But in the 2000s, that's not progressive.
Yeah, because otherwise it looks like one's been saying something negative when you might not mean
I'm
it.
definitely not. No, I'm definitely not. As I say, I think that it fitted with the kind of nasty uncle character, particularly with like Gazzo, for example. And when I interviewed him, he talked the same. He said he sees the lines as being, some of it being somewhat problematic now. He admits that himself, I think. So I went through rewriting all these lines, and then I started writing my own lines. I started working in Camden Market. I worked in Trafalgar Square a lot. I'd find pitches where I could do 4 or 5 shows a day, and so you can really start playing with the material and developing it. And over time, a character started emerging from all of these lines, and this character unintentionally actually chimed with my own life a lot. My discomforts, the fact that I'm a social idiot in some way, living in squats and being a bit of a sort of radical. All this stuff was, unintentionally informing the work. Of course, it sounds stupid saying it now. Of course it did. I'm writing stuff from what I feel, so of course it's going to be from me. And so this character starts forming of this kind of very low status, kind of down and out guy that is at the same time saying things that are overtly horrible, but contextually and on the underneath actually very positive, very nice. So lines I do, like I'd see someone walking past with a fur jacket on, and I'd say, oh my god, look, she's killed Animal from the Muppets, my favorite Muppet is dead. And so you're acting like an idiot in some way, but you're saying what I hope would be quite clever things. One of the nicest things I ever had said to me was a guy walked up to the end of the show and he said, I listened to everything you said and it was amazing. There's all hidden meanings in everything you're saying. It's like you're a philosopher. And that was the kindest thing anyone had ever said to me, because that's what I wanted. That's what I mean by art, is that I'm saying stuff that people can laugh and can accept and feel comfortable with. I'm not preaching at people. I'm not making them feel conflict with the ideas I'm bringing up because it's farcical. But at the same time as that, these people can engage with those ideas through the farce, through the harmlessness of that, without finding their own ideologies coming in conflict with that. And that can then in some ways inform. They might completely disagree with me, but they've thought about it. Something's been evoked in them about it. And as soon as I started getting to this point, I realized that I didn't want to do any tricks whatsoever. I took all tricks out of my show, just the tennis racket and half an hour or 40 minutes or however long it might be. I used to do hour-and-a-half long shows of just chat and play, and I started loving when people came into the show.
Did you have the kids?
I had a guy come into the show once, and this is, I think, a good.
Did you have the kids?
No, the kids came a little bit later. I had a kid routine, but the kid routine is nowhere near what it is now. It doesn't have the contextual bits to it and everything. That comes slightly later. I get a kid out, and I get a kid to do a few things, and then I'd sit the kid at the back of the pitch, and the kid would get a fiver at the end. It was already established that you give kids money to make money. At the beginning of me starting in Covent Garden. So I'd started doing this quite early on. At that point, I was really just focusing on doing walk-by. I'd do walk-by, I'd do loads of comedy, then I'd get the kid out, I'd put my leg behind my head, and I'd put my body through a tennis racket. But there'd be half an hour of walk by, following, playing, all this kind of stuff. And I did a lot more following. I did a lot more character work at that point. I was doing a lot of impressions. So I do internal monologues of people's minds as they walk past. I actually did a lot more diverse material than you'd probably see me do nowadays, because other things have come in now. The show has grown and it's squashed the play a little bit again. So as I'm doing that, I decide, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to focus on. I develop this character, this low status character. I start understanding what it means to be low status. I intentionally wear suits that aren't fitting and are ripped and are torn. I intentionally don't do what I might have done before, which is be completely clean shaven or have tidy hair. I don't worry about that. I'm quite comfortable in looking like I'm sort of homeless. I like the crowd to look at me and not know whether or not I'm capable and intentionally doing things or a bit mad. I like that. I like that as a starting position. I found that I could be a lot more extreme with the comedy and the following and the things I talk about. I could go a lot closer to the bone, talk about stuff that was a lot more personally important to people. If I played this character, if I presented myself as someone who was in no way a social and a status threat to them, very low status, so people can laugh it off. I can mock people for not seeing their children, or for, it's hard to think of examples here, for wearing fur, or for being a businessman. I can really go quite hard on people for that. I can have conflict with people in the show, and I do have a lot of conflict in shows. I like having conflict in shows, and audiences will accept me having conflict in shows because I've formed this role of this kind of quite bright but down and out plucky underdog. So I had one instance where a lady walks past the back of the show at Trafalgar, and I do the most innocuous line ever. I must admit, even at this point, me and Byron Bertrand, who's another great linesmith, he writes really, really good comedy for the street, really good walk by. We shared a few lines. We spent in Edinburgh together, started sharing lines. And when we were sharing these lines, one of the lines he had, which I really loved, which was quite similar to my Muppet joke, was, oh my God, look, this lady, she's killed a cheetah. She found the cheetah. She killed the cheetah. She skinned the cheetah. She is now wearing the cheetah. She is a killer. And so I did this line to a lady who walked past in what was obviously a fake leopard skin jacket. And she walks past and there's no big problems. I carry on with the show and I've got my kid out. We're about to begin this kid routine. And when I begin the kid routine, she starts storming into the center stage. And I've got my music on at this point. I think I'm still doing some stuff with music. I think I put music back in or something. I was always playing around with bits. And so I turn the music off and I take the microphone off and I hold it in between us. So it looks as if I've taken the microphone off so we're going to have a private conversation. But in fact, everything's being picked up on the microphone and broadcast to everybody. Because I realise that this line that I've used is so innocuous. It's so obviously light-hearted and playful. And it means the opposite of what it's saying. Even though I'm saying she's a killer, what I'm actually saying is that, because I can see she's got a fake fur jacket on, I'm saying you shouldn't wear real fur. There's something of that in it, you know. It's not explicit, but there's a thing there. And so when she comes out and she starts talking, as soon as she begins talking, I think, oh my God, this is fucking gold. She goes, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you slander my name? And I went, slander? Slander? What are you talking about? Look, sir, take your hands out of your pockets. You've been playing with yourself for hours. Miss, and fold your arms. They're going to sag anyway, which are hack lines. There's still some hack lines in my work at this point. And I go, look, jokes. They're jokes. Everybody here understands that. Nobody thought you killed a cheetah. And she went, I am a vegetarian. Everybody starts laughing. And then she goes, how fucking dare you? And as she says that, the mother of the child volunteer goes, how dare you fucking swear in front of my fucking child? Her husband's holding her back. And I have to quietly go up to her and go, look, it's okay. Is it all right for the kid to be here? She went, yes, it's fine, darling. It's fine. And I went, look, I can deal with this. It's okay. I've got this. And she goes, all right. And then calms herself down. And I go back out to her. And I say, look, what do you want from this? Why are you here? And she went, well, you can at least say you were sorry. I went, okay. Put the mic back on. I am so sorry. And then she leans back, kicks me in the shin and walks off. The entire crowd, I turn around to this point, I go, shall we continue the show, everybody? And everyone cheers and goes mad. Now, people don't think you should deal with conflict in shows. Street shows are the only real place you can deal with conflict in a show. Because when you're being paid to be somewhere, the last thing they want for their paying guests is to have to deal with conflict. Whereas when you're on the street, we all have a kind of equal state there. Everyone's just milling about in a public place. So if conflict happens, I'm not compelled to not present that conflict. The challenge for me then is to present that conflict with an element of truth, for it to be informative for the audience, not to be pointless, to not be cruel and unkind to the person I'm having that conflict with, and also as well, at the same point as that, to be just. If I can have all those things, I can have conflict in my show, but that conflict can be positive. And everybody at the end, apart from potentially the person who's being a dick, who you're showing being a dick, and this is where justice comes into it. You're being just. You're not being cruel to them. You're just allowing them to present their negative emotional state to everyone in the crowd. It's informative in human condition.
You're walking on a fine line now.
100%. It's a difficult thing to do. You have to, for one thing, you have to accept that you're going to get punched in the face sometimes. You have to accept that people will hurt you, like that lady kicking me in the shin. And you can't up the ante. You can't attack that person because you've allowed them to make a fool of themselves. You're bringing this out of them in some way. So you have to accept the consequences of that to some extent. And the other thing, as I said, is you can't be cruel. You can't sit there and belittle this person because no one's going to sit there and allow it. No audience is going to empathize and support you bullying somebody. What they will do, though, is they will watch you struggle, as we talked about before, with someone being unreasonable. And they will allow you to let that person dig a hole for themselves. So I had one years ago, really strange situation. I'm down on the South Bank, and a guy walks past me because I've told you I present myself as being a bit of a down and out when I'm performing, and I play very low status when I perform. I walk out and they go, please stop and watch. And I act almost like I don't know what I'm doing, you know. Potentially in some way to get people who get it to begin with, so I know that they'll understand the material and their understanding will be conveyed to the rest of the crowd. But also as well, it's a character thing. I was actually quite disappointed a lot of times. I think some of my best character work is done in the first 5 minutes to the least amount of people. But anyway, I'm beginning this show, and this guy walks past, and he goes, get a fucking real job. And as he says that, instantly, because of course I've heard this before, I've pondered over these statements that people give you. How do you respond to that? What's the information that you want to convey when responding to that? And so when he said it instantly, I'm back at him and I say, really? A real job? What do you do? Sell shoes? Unless you're a doctor or a solicitor, everybody's already got shoes. Your job's as pointless as mine. To which he turns around and he stomps up to me and says, who the fuck are you talking to, you fucking junkie? I went, I'm talking to you. He went, what are you, some kind of idiot? Yes, I am. And he's just screaming at me. And as he's screaming at me, the crowd starts to gather. And I'm just quietly saying to him, so no one else is like, go on, keep going. Show everyone how much of a dickhead you are. Go on, please, keep doing it. And he just goes more and he goes more. He's bigger, louder. And then I speak to the mic and I say, oh, look, thank you. Thank you for gathering me, this huge crowd of people. You're doing an amazing job, far better than I ever could. He runs, kicks over my speaker. Everyone goes, ooh. So then I take the mic off and I'm shouting. I'm going, look, everybody, look at this human being. Look how evolved he is. He's incredible. Look how he's being this intelligent master of culture. And he goes, what are you, some sort of fucking clown? I'm like, now you're getting it. Now you understand. And he went, what, are you some kind of funny man? Do you think you're fucking funny? I went, well, maybe. I mean, they're laughing. And then he looks and he realizes all these people are around him. He kind of twigs what's going on. And then starts doing an impression of a chicken. Like a really emotive expression of a chicken. With full leg bending, head moving, his arms are going out beside him. And you can see the entire crowd just looks confused because they don't know what the fuck he's trying to communicate now. He's gone from being this aggressive, really mean, violent, potentially guy, to doing an impression of a chicken because he's understood, clicked how the context is and what's happening around him, but he has no idea how to deal with that. And so he looks up after doing this impression of a chicken, expecting everyone to laugh, and everyone just blankly looks at him, you know, like you farted in an elevator, disapproving, unhappy, and confused. And I turn around and just go, well, comedy's a lot harder than it looks, isn't it? Everybody laughs. And then he smiles at me and goes, oh, fuck off, mate. And then walks off with a big grin on his face. I think something beautiful happened there. Not just did I get to show that his opinion was wrong and it wasn't valid, I got to soak up his aggression and deal with it in a commanding but polite way. And at the end of it, he smiled and laughed and left. He didn't feel like I'd made him less, even though he'd shown everybody how much of an idiot he was. The sad thing about that was I then gathered that crowd of people who thought this was the most incredible piece of performance art they'd ever seen. And then I had to go through a fucking tennis racket, which was just, I was just almost ashamed.
Anti-climax.
Oh, mate, I showed them something real. There was something real that happened there. That guy was genuinely being emotive. He was genuinely going off on one. And I was surfing and controlling his emotional state while presenting to everyone what's going on, giving context to what's going on while surfing the way he was dealing, the way he wanted to deal with me. I love that way of dealing with conflict. I had a crazy lady once in a show. I say crazy lady, she was probably schizophrenic. And she stood at the back of the show, she's like, you fucking queer, you're going to hell. God is going to burn you in hell, you fucking queer. And I've got a kid out. And I turn around to the family, I go, are you okay? Is it all right if he stays? I mean, yeah, fine, you carry on. And she comes out and starts talking to me. And as she's talking to me, I start walking away. And then she walks up to me again. So she's trying to maintain this 6 foot distance to talk to me. So I walk off again. She walks up to me again. And so then we start circling. And she's chasing behind me. And then she starts talking to my kid. She stops and talks to the kid. So I go, kid, quickly, come here, you're safe here. He comes up next to me. And then she starts chasing me and the kid. And then we're all walking around. And I look back at her face. And she's got a smile on her face. She started, through all this viscera, through all this horror, she started to understand we're playing a game. And she started smiling and enjoying that game. And God knows if that lady gets a chance to do that very often. Because she tells people they're going to burn in hell and screams at them rather than talks to them. Because, whatever's going on in her head doesn't allow her to socialize properly. That suddenly I've managed to make this person that's ignored most of the time a playful element of the show. The entire crowd can watch her and they can engage with her. And she's smiling and she's enjoying it now. And she's part of the game. And by the end of it, she goes and sits at the back of the crowd and watches the show.
You've treated her as a human being.
Yes, because I'm not afraid to be in conflict with her.
Then I will put some point to you, and I think we both agree. You talked about the gift idea when something happens in the show, like that woman coming in.
Yes.
And one of the problems I sometimes see people do is they use volunteers for gags, but they're not with them. They're not really treating them as a human being. They're treating them as a gag. I get my gag, get my laugh, and then I move on. I just ignore them. What's your opinion about that?
Well, look at how I did a show before when I was doing the power show. And look what I told you about that power show. I couldn't drop a beat. I couldn't take a breath. It had to work in it was like a band, All the instruments had to chime together. The drums had to hit on time. Otherwise, it felt weird. It didn't work. It didn't function. There wasn't content to support it. It was just the fine-tuning of a mechanism. It was the gears locking together in a right position to make everything work. You don't give the crowd much chance to think. You don't want them to think too hard. You just want all the gears to work, all the psychological manipulation to work at the same time together properly so that you reach this peak point and then you get paid. How the fuck can you take time and treat someone like a human being when you're doing that? Because their input can't work. They have to behave like any other cog in that machine. And if they don't, the machine doesn't work properly. That's why I had to take all the shit out of my show. Because I had to allow myself time and space to be able to fuck around. I had to make a loose working show so that you can drop things and go and take time to run around in a circle or take time to chat to somebody and go into stuff. And if they throw stuff back at you, to be allowed, and not to be allowed, but to give yourself space and time and the rhythm with a crowd, the understanding from a crowd of who you are and what you're doing, that doing that isn't the death of the show. You're not trying to peak and build up all the energy to this point and hype it. You're telling jokes and you're meandering and you're creating a rhythm that's off key to what you're doing, and it will support people watching, going, well, what the hell is he going to do now? What's he going to say to this person? What's happening here? And in that, you can then play. You can then have room and space for people to take things in their own direction. I had a guy once, years and years ago, and this is a good example of how other artists can try and help you and ruin a show. This guy walked into my show at Trafalgar, right? And he's got a completely pink face. His face is broad, you know, and he's got no neck, broad shoulders, big bloke. And he's wearing a kind of Hawaiian party time t-shirt. He's got scars all over his face. He looks like he's been thrown through 1,000 windows. And he's got a plastic bag with 7 cans of K-cider in it, and a K-cider in his hand. For people who don't know, K-cider is an extreme strength cider. It's about 9%. It's the loved of alcoholics. And so I look at him as he walks into my edge, and he's about 6 foot into my edge. And I'm just about to begin the show. I've got full edge watching that. Probably about 200 people, maybe a little more. And I think, okay, I can try and shoo you off, but I don't want to do that. I want to try and engage with you. And how am I going to engage with you? I'm going to try and talk to you in a level that's going to be close to maybe what your mates talk to, but slightly different. And so he's got the case cider in his hand. And they go, oh, what a finely crafted drink you have there. And he turns around to me and he goes, yeah, and if I hit you around the head with it, I'll kill you. And I went, oh, okay, well, you could kill me. Or I tell you what, if you watch the show and I'm not shit, you don't kill me. How does that sound? He went, all right, if you're not shit, I won't kill you. And sits down at the back of the show. And I keep going back to him every bit in the show going, how's it going? Turn around to the crowd going, look, real critic, real jeopardy, real danger. You know, and he becomes my old guy from the Muppets. Basically, that's his character. That's what he's playing there now. And what I liked about that was when he walked in, you could feel a tension around the entire crowd. You could feel a nervousness. They were worried. They were scared of him. And much like with the other lady, I managed to humanize him. I managed to play with him and show him that there's a human being behind all those scars. That there's a person there who wants to play and have fun. You've just got to find a way to get to it. And then as I'm beginning the show and doing stuff, one of the breakers in the queue quietly tries to move him off the pitch, thinking he's helping. From the guy's perspective, he's horrified because I've given pride of place. He's sitting in, you know, the direct behind the show. He's part of the focus of the show. And then this young gobshite is coming to move him. So they start fighting. And the second they start fighting, in the middle of the show, and more so than it's not even about disruption. It's not about the fact that it was distracting, because you can deal with all of that. It's the moment of safety that I created, that sense of feeling safe, that sense of him being a human being that they can feel comfortable with and engage with. It popped like a bubble. And everybody suddenly didn't have faith in me. They didn't trust me. And the rest of the show was a living hell because of that. It was just disappointing. And it just shows you, any of the performers, if you're not asked to go and help someone in a show, don't go and fucking help. They've probably got it under control.
So also, is it not that you've created a moment of theatre? It's like you've created the theatre, you've created the stage, you create the atmosphere. Someone's come in and brought reality in.
Yes. Yeah, well, I'd like to believe that, you know, even though it is a piece of theatre, I'd like to believe that him being someone they can invest in, a human being with feelings, isn't theatre. That is reality. I'd like to think that reality is, particularly in a street show, reality is the thing you're constantly hinting towards. It's the thing you're constantly trying to, through, you know, a camera obscura, through different mirrored devices, so you give a sense of safety that you're trying to represent and show. You're trying, through conflict especially, you're trying to show people a reality in a controlled way. Show someone being furious in a controlled way where there's very little risk of anything really bad happening and anyone really being hurt in the end. And yeah, reality sometimes goes that way. And just for me, at least, it was the fact that the theatre had disappeared, that the suspension of disbelief was gone. But I think it was also as well that I tried to present a reality that he was safe and that he was someone that they could feel comfortable with. And I was shown to be, through context, wrong, which I I know he was probably quite an aggressive guy. You don't get all those scars for no reason. But I thought in that context, which he was, he would be safe and fine to have in there. And his humanity would shine through in a little way.
And it's at this point I'm thinking, because I don't do this normally. How do we move this forward, Matt?
Okay, well, I can do this quite easily. I know what I want to talk about now. I'm going to talk about the building my kids' routine. And so this is really where the pretensions for art come in. So, as I said, I did a fine art degree at least a year and a half before. And I had this idea running through all of the work. And I kept saying this to people. And people always tell me you're wrong. I said, you can do art on the street. It should be street art. It shouldn't just be entertainment. There should be something important and valuable there. And hopefully everyone's starting to get an idea of the angles I go to try and get that. And so I wanted to do a kid's routine. I thought, I'm getting this kid out to give him £5. I want the entire show to be about giving this kid £5 from start to finish. And that does one thing, also as well, I want to earn money doing this. It means I can talk about money the entire way through the show. From start to finish, I've got £5. It's being used as a prop all the way and as a MacGuffin kind of thing or whatever, How do I do this? And so I thought, okay, I'm going to make the kids compete for this £5. And I thought, well, what does that do? What can I talk about? What's important or what's valuable that I can express with this? And so what I realized was that you can make kids compete, and that's capitalism. You are literally creating a metaphor for capitalism with these little kids, holding up this £5, making all these kids compete, and then you get rid of the ones that lose. And it feels horrible. It feels uncomfortable. You specifically do it so that hopefully you can walk that line right, that it makes people squirm, because you don't want to see children treated in a way that capitalism treats all adults. But at the same time, the kids, because of the way you present it and because of the way you're playing with them, they just see it as a silly game. They don't get the lofty concepts that you're bringing in. So I developed this routine where you draw the kids out with this £5. You make a reference to, and I began with talking about the Running Man, but it's 1980s. So you use the Hunger Games, it's competition, this is capitalism. All of these kids are going to be competing. Only one of them is going to win. The public decides who brings you the most joy. And this show began, or this section of the show began as being a damning indictment of capitalism. It was meant to show that capitalism is cruel and you all cheer for it anyway. But what it actually became in the end, which I think is far more interesting, is it became a very balanced routine, because people did cheer. Usually the best kid did win. Usually the kids that didn't care or didn't want to join in didn't win. The people who put the most in did win. So it became this huge balanced metaphor about capitalism, where you can put lines in every section of the way, which gives little more hints, little bits of information about it. You can turn around and be like I like to play sometimes with the kids, a judgy bit of a mean uncle, where when a kid doesn't put any effort in at all, you can send them back and say, yeah, you get what you put in this life. And so you're almost giving kind of some ethical, moral guidance in it, And so that routine is something I'm incredibly proud of now. The fact that it becomes this routine that is a huge pumping routine. You're getting people to cheer for each kid, or not, as it may turn out. You're getting the kids to dance around to music or to do a little piece of theatre each, which has its own value as you're building a show. But at the same time, I'm weaving in these ideas of capitalism and competition. And I eventually built a whole show called Political Child, which goes from capitalism and then moves on to socialism and then ends up in fascism. And so you use all these kids to create political systems and to get them to play with each other and with the crowd to express these things and to experiment with them. And it was a big experimentation to begin with. And it still is to this day. I don't think the Political Child show is finished at this point. I will see that show going on for years and years and years in the future until I get it quite right, until all the little bits of it are ready. One of the things I learned a lot working with the kids and working with these metaphors is to have lots of outs in every way you go, which still support and work the metaphor, work it in a different way, and lots of ways to work it. So I'll throw a weapon down at the beginning when I say this is like the Hunger Games. These kids, and it's a very hacky piece, but I'd like to believe it's built into a bigger, loftier concept. I'd throw a weapon down and say, right, kids, fight. I'd get the crowd to cheer, fight, 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 to encourage all these kids to run to grab this weapon to compete for the £5. And as soon as the kids run to grab the weapon, you pick it up or you put your foot on it, you deny the kids access to it. And then you turn around to the crowd and you say, see, do you see how easily society can fall apart? Children running to weapons, crowds cheering them on. So you slowly set the audience up and you've made them an element of the narrative. You've made them part of some of the messaging. Because I do think that, you know, we can get easily caught up. Society does fall apart quite easily. You can look through history and see that happening. And so to be able to play that and bring that idea up and talk about that concept in a show, while it's still funny and playful and interesting, and it doesn't feel like it's weighty. You're not a professor doing a cradle talking about these ideas. You're just creating circumstances which will allow you to bring these ideas up, and then people might take something away from it or they might not. You know, I'm very, very proud of that routine. Describing it now, it almost seems a little empty, a little shallow, but I certainly am proud of it. I believe it's an example of street theatre that has subtext and metaphor. There's subtext in there, and it is a whole metaphor. The entire piece has a metaphor about society and about the way we interact with each other, the way we reward each other. You know, I told you I'm pretentious, quietly pretentious. So, you have any thoughts, Mel?
No, we've discussed it before, so I haven't got anything I can add to that.
Fair enough. Well, I really, really, really like the idea of doing that, and I love the idea. I did it in Edinburgh, and so the thing I've tried to do with this show for years now is figure out how the fuck you end it. It's an amazingly powerful building show. When you get all these kids out, you start playing the games, and there's loads of jokes all the way through, and the bits are genuinely funny. I think if you compellingly and confidently present complex ideas in a silly, farcical way, and the comedy is tight and the timing is tight, you can get huge rolling laughter through it. It becomes a really strong routine. Then you can go into socialism, and socialism writes itself. You get all the kids back, and you explain how socialism is the great equalizer. So you can do things like, for example, I don't do this in the show, but you could rip the £5 note up into 10 pieces and give them all 10 pieces each. But the problem with that, if you did that, then is you're communicating that socialism devalues it. And I didn't want that. I wanted it to be more complex than that. I didn't want to just cuss socialism. I mean, I wanted to, at the beginning, cuss capitalism. But now I don't want to cuss capitalism. I actually write the routine and develop the routine for it to be balanced and talk about the good and the bad. So I wanted the same with socialism. So you do this big speech about how it's a great equalizer and how every single one should have an equal chance and how we should look after every person, not just the brightest, not just the one who fits the position the best. And the only way we do that, and you hand hats out to the kids, is through taxation. And you send the kids out into the crowd and you get them to go and tax the crowd, take money from the crowd. And then when you bring the kids back, you can talk about, and I quite like
you haven't been doing that taxation bit.
I do that in festivals. The problem with that is that in a street pitch, I think it's just a bit too cerebral for them. You know, I think there's too much there for them to have to engage with, and there's too much discomfort in the longer form routine, and for people who aren't necessarily going to see you. If people have come to see you and they're there to see a show, these routines kill because you have the focus. But people decide to stay or leave, and you're then talking about socialism, you do these big speeches, sending kids out with money, with hats to collect money. You'd lose half of your people, I think, or you'd lose some people. And you don't really want to do that at that point in the middle of the show.
So, Matt, do you think you're one of the few shows that actually tries to add some social and political commentary?
Overtly, yes, I do. I don't. It's not just social. It's not just social commentary. I think that, as I told people earlier, I've been told repeatedly that you can't do art on the street, and that's a very pervasive opinion. Use the street to make your money. You do the art on the stage, and I disagree with that. I thought that the street is the perfect place to do art. One of the reasons why, and I didn't mention this earlier, and I really should have, and I'm a bit pissed off myself I didn't. One of my main gripes when I left university was that most art happens in a gallery, happens in a white cube, and it's made for creative people to mull over and talk to each other about. And it doesn't really affect the world. And when I talked about the guerrilla art movements and when I talked about the mural movements, they affected the world in a very positive way. And street art has more of a chance to do that than any other art, any other form of performance.
But that
because you're not performing to your people.
That doesn't see. You know, back in late 70s, early 80s, people were doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But it doesn't seem to happen now.
No.
So what's going on? Or are we going too far away from your story if we go on that?
Well, we can, but I'm happy to talk about this. What I think's happened is, I think one thing is that the rent relief's gone. So the rent relief, what we mentioned earlier, was the squatting. Everybody was bloody signing on, so it seems. There was lots of different ways that people could get enough to live without having to work 5 days a week, non-stop. Whereas now, there's very little rent relief. If you want to be a squatter, that's more or less a full-time job in and of itself. Signing on is a lot more problematic. I know everybody's signing on now, but before signing on was a lot more problematic. And I suspect when this is over, signing on will be even more problematic. So we don't have rent relief. We don't have artistic subsidy, not a lot of it anyway. And so people don't have the space to develop these original works. And these original works, they can become something which can economically support the individual or the group. But it takes time for that to happen. And we don't have that. So people are having to, almost off the bat, get in there and earn money straight away. That's coupled with the fact that in the early 80s to the mid 80s to the early 90s, street performers were earning huge amounts of money because they've come off the back of that. And the people who then came in the mid 90s and later from there, the big thing that they were all aware of is this is an amazing earner. And if you weren't doing an amazingly profitable show, it almost felt a bit like you were doing it wrong. When I first went to Covent Garden, I developed a power show. Everybody talked to each other about how much money they made, constantly. And if you weren't making that money, you weren't doing the right job. You know, it wasn't about artistry. It wasn't about what you put in your show. If someone out there and did a show that was artistically credible, but didn't get money in the hat at the end, people would kind of laugh a bit about it. And they go, oh, he doesn't get it, does he? He doesn't understand. So, of course, that culture drives people to make money shows. And it drives people away from, and I do think there is, to some extent in street shows, a battle between art and craft, between creating a message and trying to do something interesting and making a show that makes money and is effective. Having that machine or having this open space thing that you can work through or do something that people will find challenging in some way.
But you can, at the end of the day, you still have to be entertaining, because at the end of the day, what is performance about? It's about being interesting and entertaining.
Yes.
If you cut that out and start just giving some sort of political message, well, that's going to be boring as hell.
I agree. And one of the things I learned quite quickly on in writing stuff is that you can't directly say what you think, and you shouldn't. If you do that, generally speaking, you go into conflict with people.
Well, then you'd be a preacher as well.
Well, I don't necessarily mind being a preacher if people listen to it. God knows if I had slightly less morals, I'd be a bullshit guru. But I think that as soon as you bring up a very solid idea you have of what something is, people who are watching you then have to either agree with you or come into conflict with you inside their own mind. And you want to avoid that at all costs. You want to be able to mull around an issue. You want to hide and fold everything you do into farce. That it's playful and it's silly and that it's not serious. Whereas secretly there are serious things behind it. You want to be able to put those messages, or at least put an idea up for, intellectual experimentation in the viewer's mind without forcing them to make a decision about it. And I think that's the important thing. And that, all of that stuff doesn't make you money. I have a line I do in my show. Anyone who's watched this show will see I smoke a lot of cigarettes, and I will probably die of lung cancer. Hopefully not, but probably will. I'm addicted to them, as my mother was, as a lot of people who were friends hung around with when I was kids. So I do a line in my show which is specifically made to make people feel bad and uncomfortable. because I saw all the smoking lines. People go, oh yeah, you know, I only smoke during shows. I'm doing 20 shows a day at the moment. And I hated those lines because they made smoking seem fun and pleasant, and it's not. It's a horrible, stupid addiction that people get trapped into. So I thought, how can I do something in a show that addresses this? What do you do to address that? When the kids see people laughing about smoking, it's a positive anchor for smoking with the kids in the crowd. So I thought, okay, well, I'll create a negative anchor. So I turn around as people walk past smoking now, I'll go, oh, smoking. Did you know they found out that smoking makes you look more attractive when you're dying of lung cancer? And I do it specifically to appall the adults, to make them feel uncomfortable and unhappy. Because that then translates, at least in my mind, to the kids who are watching, feeling appalled and unhappy about the subject matter. Now, that doesn't make you money. That costs you money. Why would someone just trying to make money do that?
It's an interesting problem because at the end of the day, if you're making your living from street entertaining, you have to earn enough money to pay the bills.
Well, that's the challenge. The
challenge, pay your food, pay your rent.
Well, the challenge is to be an artist and make money at the same time. Luckily, I've kept my costs quite low. I live in a boat. I own this boat. I bought it for £250 and I built it myself. Built it all up. The roof was caving in and everything was fucked in. So I built a whole new roof and kept my costs low. And that's one of the only reasons I think I've been able to develop a show, which now is, I'm very happy to say, one of the highest hatting shows in London when it goes and when it works. It was one of the highest hatting shows in the Edinburgh Festival with some of the best shows in the world. And it has all those elements in it. It has subtext, metaphor. I do make people feel comfortable sometimes. And I do stuff that I would like to believe is art. It's not great art. It's trashy as fuck. And it's presented as being trashy as fuck. I play a down and out character. I'm trying to subtly put things across. But that's the challenge. And this is why I described it as a battle between craft and art. The more art you put in there, the more you have to compromise the craft, generally speaking.
Right, Matt, we're coming towards 2 hours. And I don't think it'd be a great idea, personally, to move on to the subject of all your battles on the street, which are...
Well, I'll be honest, they're the most interesting stories. All the good stories about battling the council, battling security guards. I've got some amazing stories for this. Really have.
I think that should be part 2, though.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Because 2 hours is quite a long time, and there's a whole other journey with the political stuff that is ongoing. You know, we know there is problems. We know that in London, Westminster are trying to make sure they control everything, and when they control everything, then they can decide if that they don't like someone and they can remove them. So, I mean, that's a current battle.
Well, we're going to turn very soon, the buskers of London, who have been negotiating with councils and negotiating with businesses, are going to turn into beggars. They're going to have to beg. They'll say, please don't do this. Please don't do that. Our entire power base within the next 3 months is about to disappear. All of it. The freest city in the world to be a public artist, a public performer, will soon be gone. 3 months.
Well, maybe gone. It may be people will be able to fight it.
Potentially. I will certainly try and fight it, and I hope everyone else will.
So, you got any last comments, and then we'll go into part 2.
Okay, so just in terms of performance and developing things as performers, I would say that your responsibility as an entertainer in public, as someone who is reaching the widest spectrum of the public, of any entertainer, bar television, and television is dead. What it had is gone. We are the best link now for that. If you work as a comedian, most of the people inside that venue are going to agree with you already before you say anything. If you work in a theatre, most of the people are going to agree with what you say because they've chose to go and see you. When you work on the street, you contact right-wing people, you contact left-wing people, capitalists, millionaires, paupers, homeless people, people who are radically intersectional, people who are alt-right. All of these people will be sat inside your show watching you, and you have the opportunity, and I would say the responsibility to try and affect at least some kind of change through that. So that's what I hope people in the future will try and do. You can do art on the street. You can. I think that's my closing statement.
You're the one who has to switch it off.
Okay. I forgot that. I got quite happy in my position of being the interviewed. Everyone's watching. Thank you, everyone. It's been a real pleasure to talk. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too boring for you all. For now, I'm going to